Major changes on their way for the Crucible. What's going on, Guardians? My name is the Black Link, and today is Thursday, April 25th, 2019. And it's time to cover another issue of the Bungie Weekly blog, This Week at Bungie. And this one has got some major information about a pretty big series of nerfs coming to two weapons that you know all too well. We're talking about the Pinnacle Crucible hand cannons, Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten. We got surprised with some very big information about upcoming changes to both the archetype that those weapons occupy, as well as the special perk tied to those weapons, Magnificent Howl. Now, before we get into that, there's a few other little bits of news. We're going to cover the easy stuff before jumping into the meaty topic of Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten. Of course, this week in the world of Destiny 2, Iron Banner is live. And for you Guardians out there who are putting yourself through the torture of trying to get the Iron Burden, like 2,500 kill challenge done, I salute you first and foremost. I will not be joining you, but I do salute you and your valor. It can't be easy out there with the Revelry going on. But in our first bit of news, of course, Bungie does address something to do with the Revelry Spring event itself. As we got to see last week, Revelry orbs were disabled in Gambit, Gambit Prime, Raids, and Competitive Crucible due to an increase in guitar errors and activity disconnections. And since multiple sources of progress for the Verdant Light competitive triumph tied to the Revelry are now no longer available because of that change, Bungie is changing the overall requirement to get that triumph done. From what we're seeing here, the triumph is being changed to require players to create 200 orbs by defeating other Guardians with precision kills in Quick Play, Rumble, and the featured Crucible playlist. Of course, the featured Crucible playlist this week is Iron Banner. And at this time, they're looking at reducing that number of generated orbs from 200 to 20, which should make it significantly easier to get done. Now, they go on to note here that the change is going to be deployed after the Revelry itself ends in Destiny Update 2.2.2. Players who meet the requirement of 20 orbs will have their triumph auto-complete after downloading the patch, which will also unlock the Party Harder triumph and Stimulant Spring emblem reward if all other Revelry triumphs have been completed. So if you're somebody who maybe got 20 to 25 of those orbs generated before they shut things down in Gambit and Raids last week, this will be retroactive. You will get credit for all of that. But basically, they're making these changes so that you can still fully complete all of the Revelry's triumphs. So nothing too crazy there. Moving on. Next week, we are going to have one heck of a Bungie ride-along. As they state here, last month, we featured a string of 3 Bungie bounties to celebrate Season of the Drifter and Gambit Prime. A few of you have been asking when we'd be jumping back on stream with a ride-along. With the curse in full effect this week, it's the perfect time to engage in some developer commentary in a live fire environment. We are going to be getting a Shattered Throne ride-along on Monday, April 29th, starting at 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time. You'll be able to view this over on Bungie's Twitch page at twitch.tv/Bungie. If you've never done one of these Bungie ride-alongs before, they're incredibly interesting. Basically, we get to sit down on stream with some of the developers of your favorite bits of content in the game as they run through that content and explain how they came up with certain bits of it. We generally get this with raids and stuff like that. But as they state here in the TWAB, we'll have Bungie developers in the hot seats to speak their inspirations, share some behind-the-scenes stories of development, and answer a few questions. Get ready for a fun ride. We'll see you in chat. So we're actually going to get to hear a bit about the creation of the major dungeon within the Dreaming City, the Shattered Throne. Which, I don't know about you Guardians, is incredibly exciting for me. Shattered Throne is one of my favorite bits of content in Destiny 2, so I cannot wait to learn about the inspirations and the behind-the-scenes action that brought this content about. Really looking forward to hearing that. But alright, now that we've gotten the small fries out of the way, we had some major announcements in this week's TWAB. Luna's Howl, Not Forgotten, the Pinnacle PvP rewards from Lord Shaxx are going to be seeing some major changes in the future. And yes, by major changes, I do mean some major nerfs. Here's what the dev team had to say about it. We wanted to give you a preview of some plans we have to balance Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten in Season of Opulence. After significant amounts of feedback, internal discussion, and playtesting, we've decided to adjust how these hand cannons work. For some players, these weapons can represent a significant investment of time and the personal improvement needed to acquire them. When tuning, we attempt to take into account the time commitment players make to acquire weapons and balance that against how those weapons affect the different game modes. Magnificent Howl, the unique perk on these weapons, is too effective. It works in a neutral setting and rewards players for getting precision shots, something they would have done naturally. As a result, the time to kill of the game shifts to meet this new benchmark, and players feel that the majority of primary weapons in Destiny 2 cannot compete with these pinnacle weapons. I disagree with that statement, but let's move on. Our current plan is to make Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten the only 150 RPM precision hand cannons. They will maintain some aspects of their current behavior while taking on the firing speed and damage of the 150 RPM hand cannons. Magnificent Howl will also be adjusted so that it increases only body shot damage, resulting in 2 headshot, 1 body shot kills. Magnificent Howl will still give an advantage due to requiring less precision hits for optimal time to kill. Like we do whenever Destiny gameplay evolves, we'll be watching the conversation starting today on our plan changes. We'll continue collecting feedback once these changes go live at the beginning of Season of Opulence. If you have feedback now, please make sure to sound off on the #Destiny2 forum right here on Bungie.net. And, well, since they just gave us an invitation to give our feedback, let me go ahead and do that. Ugh, I don't like it. I do not like it. Look, I definitely understand the frustration of a lot of players out there, and I'm going to try to keep this rant to a reasonably short time span. You're sick of seeing Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten out in the Crucible. You're sick of being killed by them. You think they're too centralizing for the meta. I can understand that. But this is a series of nerfs that I think maybe takes it a step too far, like what they did with Nova Warp. Personally, I would be okay with the change to RPM. Knocking it down from a 180 RPM archetype hand cannon to a 150 RPM archetype hand cannon, I think is change enough. That's nerf enough to knock down the effectiveness of the Luna's Howl and the Not Forgotten. They are very effective in virtually all situations but the longest of ranges, mostly due to the consistency and the stability that they have for being 180 RPM hand cannons in the precision frame tier. So I think slowing down that rate of fire just a little bit, I think that's probably a good enough change there. Now, I was a bit worried when, like a lot of other people, when we read this, we assume, oh, okay, well, they're knocking it into the 150 RPM tier. Does that mean it's now going to have all the detractions of 150 RPM tier hand cannons? You know, the bloom, the crazy instability, the randomness of your shots? Apparently that's not going to be the case. As one of the other community managers, Dylan took to Twitter to further address what they're changing here. He basically answered a few extra questions about this situation. He stated that the weapons are going to retain the recoil and animation of 180 RPM precision hand cannons, which basically means that the core way these weapons function isn't going to be changing. You're not going to have a different recoil pattern. They're going to fire basically the exact same way, just a little bit slower, which is really heartening for me. If they were going to change the recoil pattern and make these as inconsistent as other archetypes of hand cannons, I was going to be really upset, especially for the people who grinded all the way up to Legend to get their hands on Not Forgotten. But, moving on, the change to Magnificent Howl prevents 2-tap kills. For example, players could get 2 headshots on one enemy to proc Magnificent Howl, then defeat another in just 2 headshots. So I'm really glad they came and answered this on Twitter, because it really did answer the one pressing question I had of whether they were going to be changing the core way the Luna's Howl and the Not Forgotten worked. And I'm very happy to say that they aren't. Hopefully bloom isn't going to be a thing, although I still think that the problem here with the Luna's Howl and the Not Forgotten, it's kind of a different story whether you're playing on console or if you're playing on PC. These things are everywhere on console because they're the most consistent hand cannon option on console. Nothing even comes close. I would argue that's a problem with the way they handle hand cannons and other weapon archetypes on console. I really don't know what it is, whether it's the bloom, the stability issues, maybe it's just the way the frame rate is different, but hand cannons in archetypes that aren't 180 RPM like the Service Revolver and the Lunas and the Not Forgotten, they're just so darn inconsistent that they really disincentivize you from using them if you can get these 2 other hand cannons. And so I think it's a little bit tone deaf to just address these 2 guns while ignoring the elephant in the room of your other entirely inconsistent archetypes of this exact same weapon type. And you kind of even see that with what they're doing here, where they're knocking the Lunas down into the 150 RPM archetype, but they're not changing the precision frame, they're not changing the way the bloom or anything on it works because they don't want it to be, well, less than functional like a lot of those other hand cannons on console. On PC, it's an entirely different story. Both Lunas and Not Forgotten are not nearly as prevalent as they are on console, and that's for a lot of different reasons. They're definitely very good, very powerful weapons, but there's better stuff out there. Ace of Spades dominates both of these weapons. The Recluse SMG now is a fantastically powerful PvP option that is much easier to get than either Luna's Howl or especially the Not Forgotten. So from what I've seen, the issues of these guns being a little bit too prevalent, they're definitely prevalent everywhere, but it seems to be more of a bit of a console issue than it is something on PC. And ultimately, I think that's more so a problem with the way Bungie handles some of the other weapon archetypes than it is with the Luna's Howl and the Not Forgotten. But even putting all of that aside, I think maybe knocking these down to the 150 RPM tier while not changing the way they work at all with like the bloom or the stability or anything like that, I think that's a fine change. I think if they had stopped after that, things would be fine. It's when they come in with this nerf to Magnificent Howl that really rubs me the wrong way. 150 RPM hand cannons can already 3-tap in the Crucible. 3 precision shots and you're basically done. So this change to Magnificent Howl really kind of confuses me a little bit here. Having an activate so that you can 2 crit and then 1 body shot kind of seems a bit like a wasted ability for me on a 150 RPM hand cannon. I mean, if you've already landed those 2 other precision shots, you're not going to purposely go for a body shot. So I guess what they're trying to do here is they're trying to make it so that it's easier to secure that with a legendary 150 RPM. Right now, I think the only other 150 RPM hand cannon that can 3-tap is Thorn, I want to say. So they're kind of trying to leave a little bit of a benefit there, but that doesn't really play out very well for me. The situation of being able to 2-tap with the Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten's Magnificent Howl perk was pretty situational. You had to know what you were doing and know to basically pull off of one target, take out another one, and then go back to that initial target. It's not something that was happening constantly all the time in PvP. But I really just don't see the benefit there. So now you've got these weapons that are going to be in an archetype that can already 3-tap, and their big special ability is that they can 3-tap. I don't know, it just doesn't rub me the right way, but where this really hurts is PvE. For those of you who may not have Luna's Howl or Not Forgotten, these guns were fantastic options in PvE. And it was specifically because of the Magnificent Howl perk. If you're unaware of it, Magnificent Howl reads out like this. Rapidly landing 2 precision shots grants a short period of bonus damage until your next kill or miss. So if you were just sitting there landing precision shots against targets in PvE, you were just constantly getting big damage against targets. It actually made for a really strong option. You could pair it with a primary like Dustrock Blues or even the Arbalest now. And you had a really solid gun in PvE. And now, possibly for the sake of PvP balancing, once again, this is getting thrown to the wayside. I absolutely disagree with this decision here. This was a perk that really rewarded precision play. And now that they've moved the bonus damage to only applying to body shot hits, I don't know, it just kind of feels like 3 nerfs in one when they really could have stopped after the first one, just changing the archetype of this weapon. Not to mention the fact that I feel awful for the people who grinded out, who fought through the comp playlist, through matchmaking, who got their headshots done, who got their solar kills done, and finally worked their way up to the top of the mountain, getting to that legend rank so that they could get their hands on this weapon, only to now have it made not exactly worthless. It's not going to be worthless in PvP, but it's certainly not the weapon they grinded for. It's not the product they bought. I feel really bad for those players, and I think, like I said, even beyond the PvP environment, I think the nerf to PvE that this thing is getting is absolutely unnecessary. And so Bungie saying they're listening to feedback, well, this is mine. I think the RPM change is perfectly fine as long as you don't go crazy adding in like recoil and bloom and stuff like that. And since it is staying in the same precision frame tier, these are going to be the only 2 hand cannons in the 150 RPM archetype that are precision frame. So apparently the recoil status and none of that is supposed to be changing. So as long as it feels like it does now, but just, has a slower rate of fire, I think that's the only change that really needs to be made here. And I think Magnificent Howl is just fine the way it is. After all, we've got guns like the Recluse now, which are arguably much more powerful. Which, actually, I guess I should be worried about that getting the Nerf hammer next. But anyways, Guardians, those are my thoughts on the Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten changes. That's what's happening with them. Those are my thoughts. I'm not too big a fan of the perk nerf, but I think, I'm probably okay with the change to rate of fire. Anyways, what are yours? Be sure to let me know down in the comments section below. How do you feel about all this stuff? Are you somebody who grinded out those two weapons? What are your thoughts on the overall nerfs? Are you happy to see them nerfed? Are you one of the players out there who is sick of seeing Lunas every single game of PvP you played? Be sure to let me know. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest stuff we're putting out. But alright Guardians, that is going to be it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.